My dear beloved, there is something they haven't confessed to a single soul yet. Not to friends, not to family, not even completely to themselves. But recently, every emotional path they attempt to walk somehow winds its way back to you again. Escaping this truth has become impossible for them. Now, your presence has moved past mere memory and taken root somewhere lasting inside their inner world. At first, they assumed time would soothe everything. They believed distance would eventually quiet the feelings, make them simpler to dismiss, easier to file away into something manageable. But the reverse happened. The more quiet stretched between you, the louder your presence grew within them. And now they're starting to grasp why. Because true connection doesn't vanish just because two people go quiet with each other for a stretch. True connection lingers beneath the surface. It outlasts confusion. It outlasts fear. It outlasts moments where both hearts pretend not to care as much as they truly do, and lately their heart has grown weary from the pretending. Stay with me, because something emotional is unfolding here that even caught them by surprise. There was a recent instant where they suddenly paused in the middle of an ordinary routine, because your memory struck with unusual force. Not some dramatic memory, not even a significant moment, just something minor. The sound of your laugh, the gentleness in your voice during a calm conversation. The way your presence always brought a sense of calm even when feelings were hard to put into words. That small memory moved them more than it should have. And in that instant, something inside them finally cracked open emotionally. They realized they no longer want a future shaped by emotional avoidance. They no longer want relationships that only appear good on the surface while feeling hollow underneath, because your presence revealed to them what real emotional sincerity feels like. And now everything else feels lacking by comparison. They're starting to understand that your love was never demanding, never manipulative, never rooted in pressure. It was patient, gentle, careful, and somehow that made it all the more powerful. The world trained them to expect loud emotions, fleeting excitement, unpredictable affection. But what you felt carried something else entirely. Stability, emotional honesty, peace. And peace touches people deeply once they've spent years surviving emotional turmoil. Sometimes late at night, they relive the moments where they nearly reached out to you but held back. Moments where pride got in the way of honesty. Moments where fear masqueraded as emotional restraint. Looking back now, those moments quietly haunt them, because they see how close they came to losing something meaningful simply out of fear of fully feeling it. And perhaps the most emotional piece of all this is that they can now recognize your hidden feelings clearly in memories they once misread. The pauses in your voice, the careful holding back in your words, the moments you withdrew emotionally simply to shield yourself from disappointment. It all makes sense to them now, and instead of leaving them feeling triumphant, that realization humbles them deeply, because they understand something significant. Now, loving quietly often demands more courage than loving loudly. Anyone can display emotion when things are certain, but holding genuine feelings silently while dreading being misunderstood takes tremendous emotional strength. You did that, and they finally see it. They no longer picture a future without emotional openness. In fact, openness has begun to feel strangely beautiful to them lately. Beautiful because your sincerity showed them that real connection isn't built through emotional games. It's built through honesty resilient enough to survive fear. There are moments when they suddenly picture standing before you again after all this emotional distance. They wonder what your eyes might reveal now that silence no longer fully conceals the truth. They wonder whether the air between you would instantly feel different, softer, warmer, more emotionally open than it once was. And honestly, those thoughts overwhelm them, because deep down they already know this connection changed them for good. Not temporarily, not fleetingly, permanently. Your presence altered how they understand affection itself. Before you, they believed love was mostly intensity. Now they understand love can also feel calm, grounded, safe enough to breathe within. That understanding alone has already shifted how they move through life. Even the people around them are picking up on subtle changes. They seem more reflective lately, more emotionally distracted, less drawn to shallow attention, because once someone has tasted emotional depth, surface-level connection becomes hard to stomach for long. And you became the emotional depth they cannot replace. Listen closely, because this next truth matters deeply. They're beginning to feel emotionally protective over the possibility of you now, not possessive, protective of the bond, protective of your heart, protective of the fragile honesty that finally emerged between the two of you. That feeling catches them off guard because it arose naturally, without effort, and now they're realizing something that changes everything. They don't simply miss having you around, they miss who they become emotionally in your presence. Softer, more honest, more alive. That's why distance no longer soothes them the way it once did. Distance now feels heavy, unnatural, almost painful in ways they struggle to put into logical words. And somewhere tonight, as silence settles around their thoughts once more, they're finally admitting something they avoided for far too long. They're no longer trying to guard themselves from loving you. They're trying to figure out how to finally stop concealing it. And the nearer they move toward that emotional truth, the faster their old fears lose their grip on them. Because deep down they know something now that can't be undone. Your heart reached theirs long before words ever fully caught up. And ever since that understanding settled within them, nothing about their inner world has felt the same since. There is something shifting inside them now that even they can no longer deny. The emotional distance they once relied on for safety is starting to feel unbearable rather than comforting. And the odd part is, this shift didn't happen because anyone forced them to face their feelings. It happened gently, naturally, one realization after another, slowly dismantling the walls they spent so long constructing around their heart. Lately, they've caught themselves doing things they never used to do. Rereading old conversations, pausing when your name comes up unexpectedly, smiling at memories they once tried to bury, and every time it happens, the same thought surfaces within them, growing stronger, wondering why everything still circles back to you. That question trails them everywhere, through quiet mornings, through crowded moments among people, even while trying to distract themselves with work, routines, obligations, anything that might silence what they feel. But nothing works the way it once did anymore because your presence has already taken root too deeply within their emotional world. There was a recent moment where they nearly reached out to you on impulse, not out of loneliness, not out of a need for temporary comfort, but because suddenly staying emotionally distant from you felt wrong to them. Completely wrong. They stared at their phone longer than they normally would. Their thoughts circled endlessly. Part of them wanted to speak honestly right away. Another part feared moving too fast given everything that had unfolded emotionally between you both before. But even though they held back that night, something important still shifted. For the first time, they realized their silence isn't protecting them anymore. It's harming them. And that realization is becoming something they can no longer overlook. Now they're beginning to understand that your connection was never built on convenience. Convenience fades easily. What exists between you withstood confusion, fear, emotional distance, and unfinished conversations. That kind of bond leaves an imprint on the soul. They see that clearly now. There are moments lately where they suddenly feel emotional over the smallest reminders of you, a song, a phrase, a certain hour of night. Even silence itself sometimes feels saturated with your presence. And what unsettles them most is how natural it feels. Your presence no longer feels separate from their emotional world. It feels woven completely into it. And honestly, they're weary of pretending otherwise. Sometimes they sit alone imagining how differently things might have unfolded if honesty had come sooner between you both. They wonder how many misunderstandings grew simply because both hearts were guarding themselves too fiercely against vulnerability. And that thought stirs a quiet sadness in them, because deep down they know this connection deserved openness long before now. But there's another truth slowly becoming clear to them as well. Perhaps everything unfolded this way because both of you needed time to emotionally grow into the connection instead of rushing into it before you were ready. That realization softened something in them recently. Instead of feeling only regret, they began feeling gratitude too. Gratitude that despite all the confusion, despite all the emotional delays, the connection somehow stayed alive beneath everything, and that changes how they see your shared future. Now their feelings no longer feel abstract. They feel real enough to build a future around, real enough to alter plans for, real enough to fight fear over. And fear is exactly what they're facing right now, not fear of loving you. Fear of losing the chance to finally love you honestly. That fear keeps them awake at night sometimes, because now they understand something painful. Genuine emotional connection is rare, exceedingly rare. Most people spend years surrounded by fleeting attention, while quietly craving one person capable of truly understanding them. You became that person for them. That realization carries tremendous emotional weight. Now there are moments where they suddenly picture seeing you again, once all this emotional growth finally settles between you both. They imagine conversations free of guardedness, eye contact without hidden feelings beneath it. They imagine what it would feel like to finally release the emotional restraint every time your connection grows intense. And every time they picture those moments, their heart edges closer to courage, because courage is building within them now, little by little. The courage to stop pretending your connection can remain unresolved forever. The courage to stop acting emotionally unmoved. The courage to admit that your presence changed them far more profoundly than they originally intended. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all this is how they think of you now. It's no longer only about attraction or emotional intensity. It's become something gentler, more meaningful, more lasting. They think of peace when they think of you. Emotional safety, quiet contentment. The kind of love calm enough to build a real life around. That's what overwhelms them lately. The complete shift from fantasy into reality. The possibility that someone like you could genuinely exist in their future emotionally, not fleetingly but for good. And the more fully they allow themselves to feel that possibility, the less drawn they become to fleeing this connection anymore. Listen closely, because this next truth matters deeply. They're starting to realize your love didn't weaken them emotionally the way they once feared. It strengthened them. It made them more honest with themselves, more emotionally aware, more willing to face parts of their heart they'd ignored for years. That transformation is still unfolding quietly inside them right now. Even if you can't fully see it, even if they haven't voiced every truth aloud yet, their emotional world is already rearranging itself around the reality of you. And somewhere tonight, as your name drifts through their thoughts once more, they're finally understanding something undeniable. Some people pass through life briefly and fade like passing seasons. But others arrive carrying a feeling so rare that once the heart recognizes it, nothing afterward ever feels quite the same again. There's a quiet struggle taking place inside them now, and nobody around them fully grasps it. On the surface, they still try to seem composed. They carry on conversations, they move through their responsibilities, they smile when it's expected of them. But inwardly, everything feels different now, because your connection no longer feels like something they can push to the background of their life. It's shifted to the center, and that realization is transforming them faster than they anticipated. Lately, they've been experiencing emotional waves at odd moments throughout the day. Moments where your memory suddenly arrives with such force that they have to pause whatever they're doing just to breathe through it. Not because the feeling hurts, but because it's real, too real to brush aside anymore. There was a recent night where sleep wouldn't come easily to them. They kept turning thoughts over in their mind, replaying your presence, your voice, your energy. And somewhere between the silence and exhaustion, they admitted something to themselves they'd avoided for a very long time. They don't want another fleeting connection. They don't want shallow conversations that vanish by morning. They don't want affection without emotional depth anymore. What they want is you, not some fantasy version of you, the real you, the one who stayed emotionally sincere even while quietly guarding your heart, the one who carried genuine affection without forcing it upon them, the one whose presence felt soothing instead of confusing. And honestly, that realization shook them deeply, because now they understand why nobody else fully reached them emotionally the way you did. They're beginning to notice how different life feels whenever your presence enters their thoughts. Their mood shifts instantly, their heart softens instantly. Even hard days feel lighter for a moment when they consider the possibility of finally being emotionally honest with you. That kind of emotional impact can't be ignored forever, and the more they attempt to make sense of it logically, the more emotional it becomes instead. Sometimes they wonder whether you realize how deeply you've touched their spirit without even trying. You never demanded emotional control over them. You never pressured them into attachment. In fact, your restraint made everything more powerful because it let them discover their feelings naturally instead of feeling emotionally cornered. That changed everything for them, because genuine connection feels different from emotional pressure. And your connection always felt genuine. There are moments lately where they picture your future together so vividly it nearly feels like memory rather than imagination. Small moments, quiet moments, sitting together after long days, sharing silence without awkwardness, looking at one another without fear disrupting the emotional honesty between you both. Those thoughts linger with them now. And perhaps what moves them most deeply is how peaceful those visions feel. Not chaotic, not dramatic, peaceful. The kind of peace they secretly spent years searching for in the wrong places. They're no longer emotionally content with distraction. Things that once entertained them briefly now feel empty very quickly. Because once someone tastes emotional depth, shallow attention loses its hold. And your connection gave them emotional depth in a way they never anticipated. Sometimes they feel regret over how long fear steered their choices. They think about the emotional distance that could have been shortened had honesty arrived sooner. And every moment apart forced them to grasp the worth of what they nearly lost. Now that they fully see it, they can't unsee it anymore. There's also something else stirring inside them lately that they haven't spoken about openly. They're starting to feel emotionally protective over your shared future. They think carefully before making certain choices now. They question whether certain paths still align with the emotional truth growing within them. Because your connection no longer feels separate from their future, it feels entirely bound to it. And that realization carries enormous emotional weight. They're slowly preparing themselves emotionally for honesty, real honesty, the kind that permanently transforms relationships once it's spoken aloud. Not rushed honesty, not impulsive emotion, sincere honesty. The kind born from finally understanding what the heart truly wants after years of emotional confusion. There are nights where they rehearse conversations with you silently in their mind. They imagine finally confessing how often your presence stayed with them during hard moments. How many times they tried convincing themselves to move on emotionally and failed because your energy kept returning stronger each time. And deep down they know something now that frightens them only because it feels so important. If they lose this connection through silence again, it will wound them far more deeply than they're prepared for. That fear is growing stronger than their fear of vulnerability now. And once that balance shifts within a person, everything else begins shifting too. Their emotional walls are weakening. Their hesitation is weakening. Even the version of them that once believed emotional distance was safer is beginning to fade. Because your love reached places within them that had been emotionally dormant for far too long. And now those places are stirring awake all at once. They're no longer questioning whether your connection matters. That question already has an answer inside them. Now the only thing left is timing. Timing for honesty, timing for courage, timing for two hearts to finally stop, shielding themselves from the very love they secretly wanted all along. And before you go, if you sense this connection deepening too, comment the number 2222 below. Because sometimes numbers become quiet confirmations that two souls are finally moving toward the same emotional truth. At the same time, something even deeper is stirring inside them now. And this time, it feels impossible for them to return to the version of themselves that existed before fully recognizing your love. The emotional awakening has moved past curiosity, past confusion, past hesitation. It has become certainty slowly unfolding within their heart with every passing day. And certainty transforms people. Lately, they've started noticing how hollow certain parts of their life feel whenever your presence is absent. Emotionally, places that once distracted them now feel quiet in the wrong way. Conversations that once seemed exciting now feel unfinished. Even moments of success feel oddly incomplete because deep down there's someone they wish they could share those moments with. Naturally, that realization arrives softly at first, almost invisibly, but now it follows them everywhere. There was a recent moment where someone nearby asked a simple question about the future, and instead of giving their usual answer, their mind drifted immediately toward you, toward the possibility of building something emotionally real, instead of continuing to drift through temporary situations that never fully touched their soul. That moment shook them quietly, because they realize your presence has already become part of the future they picture privately within their heart. And perhaps the most emotional part of all this is how naturally it happened. You didn't force your way into their emotional world. You became important through sincerity, through emotional consistency, through the quiet way your presence always felt safe rather than manipulative. That kind of connection changes people slowly, then all at once. Now they catch themselves wondering what life would truly feel like beside you. Honestly, not fantasy, not idealized perfection, real life, peaceful mornings, long conversations after hard days, small moments filled with emotional safety instead of emotional confusion. And every time they picture those things, their heart softens further toward the idea of love itself. Because before you, love often felt complicated to them, heavy, unstable, hard to trust completely. But your presence introduced a different possibility, a calmer possibility, a deeper one. Their fear of vulnerability is beginning to lose its hold over them slowly but unmistakably. Before, they worried about being emotionally exposed, about caring too much, about handing someone the power to hurt them. But now another fear has grown stronger, the fear of never fully experiencing this connection honestly. And that fear is pushing them toward emotional courage in ways they never expected. There are nights where they sit alone, replaying moments with you over and over, realizing how many signs existed long before either of you fully acknowledged the truth emotionally. The hidden affection in your presence, the careful way you guarded your feelings, the emotional restraint both of you carried while pretending the connection was smaller than it truly was. Looking back now, it feels almost unbelievable to them that something so real stayed hidden beneath silence for so long. But perhaps that silence was necessary, because now when they think of you, it no longer feels like emotional fantasy. It feels grounded, mature, ready. And readiness changes everything. Your connection is mending parts of them they've never openly spoken about before. The weary part of them that grew tired of pretending emotional distance was strength. The lonely part of them that stopped believing emotional peace was possible. The guarded part of them that learned to survive without ever truly feeling emotionally safe with another person. Around the thought of you, all those walls begin softening naturally. And honestly, that emotional safety overwhelms them at times, because people spend years searching for someone capable of making the heart feel calm instead of anxious. Your presence became that calm for them without even trying. That's why they can't stop thinking about you lately. Not because they're emotionally lost, but because they're emotionally discovering themselves through this connection. There are moments now where they feel almost drawn toward you internally, as though something inside them already knows the distance between you can't continue forever. The nearer they move toward emotional honesty, the more unbearable silence begins to feel. And somewhere deep inside, they already know something important. Your connection is approaching a turning point, a moment where hidden emotions will no longer stay comfortably hidden, a moment where truth will begin outweighing fear entirely. And the closer that moment draws, the more emotionally restless they become. Because now they understand something they once refused to admit. Your love was never a burden to them, it was a gift, a rare one, the kind that arrives quietly and reshapes the emotional direction of an entire life afterward. They're beginning to release the old version of themselves that believed emotional distance was safer than emotional honesty. That version is fading now, little by little. In its place, someone gentler is emerging, someone more emotionally awake, someone finally ready to stop treating genuine love like something dangerous. And every single realization keeps guiding them back to the